Hi, I'm Emily Gordon-Smith, Director of Consumer Product here at Stylus, and today I'm going to be talking about how we all really need to wake up to a new order in the fashion system. And I'm going to highlight 5 ideas that you need to get on board with, let's call them wake-up calls, or risk becoming irrelevant and redundant. I'm not going to reveal what they are right now, I'm just going to dive straight in with the first one, which is it's not all about millennials, which we're obviously all aware of. But as an industry, we continue to relentlessly over focus on this demographic, despite the fact that we know that they're the most cash poor in terms of disposable income, with them all either saving up for that first home or paying ridiculous rents for small rooms in tiny apartments. And that's a fact. They are currently the most cash poor generation in terms of discretionary spend. So I just want to remind ourselves about the other lucrative and fashion hungry demographics out there, starting with the boomers or over 55s. And this is actually a picture of Sue Evans, one of our catwalk consultants, and her husband Mike. And they, like most other boomers, kind of feel forever young, as you can see. They're literally nothing like their own parents. And this is a rapidly growing and wealthy demographic. But when it comes to fashion, they're pretty much off the industry radar. And other analysts completely agree. As Marshall Cohen at MPD says, the fastest growing segment with the highest discretionary spending power is the boomer demographic, yet marketeers still put all their eggs in the one millennial basket. And this makes absolutely no sense because the over 55s account for nearly half of all consumer spending in the US. If you add 52 to 54-year-olds into that mix, it's actually over half. And they account for a whopping 70% of household wealth. And those numbers are pretty similar across territory. In fact, globally, this market will be worth an astonishing $15 trillion by 2020. And it's also worth noting that this demographic is actually going to double in numbers over the next 30 years. And the good news is that they love to spend it. They really are out there spending the kids' inheritance. Their spend has grown by an average of 4.5% annually for the last 10 years, compared with only 1.2% for their younger compatriots. But they're not spending as much on clothing as they'd like because according to surveys, they feel completely underserved by the fashion industry. And I don't think this is as much about product as it is about marketing and actually speaking to and engaging with this audience. So there's such a massive opportunity here, and one that the travel industry, as an example, has totally embraced, with the over 55s now accounting for over 60% of all travel leisure spend. And that industry is responding really well to the demographic's wants and needs and is feeding the boom. From the boomers to the Gen Xers, and this is a bunch of Gen Xers partying in London at one of the city's many club nights, currently being marketed to over 40s who really don't want to hang up their party shoes just yet. And stats from both Bankrate and Goldman Sachs say that this generation actually spend more money in bars, cafes, restaurants, and on gambling than any other demographic. But again, greater disposable income than the millennials and happier to get into debt than the boomers. And it's another demographic that's really hungry for fashion, but feels woefully underserved by the industry. This is Tiffany Dark, who is now editor-in-chief at Harrods, and a picture of her back in the day clubbing in the 90s. And she told us, Gen X dress in a cool way. We're not going to hang up our fashion credibility yet. We really loved our youth and we don't want to let go of it. So it's that forever young piece again, but again, we aren't engaging with this lucrative demographic in the way that we should. So while we're not engaging with them in terms of marketing and retail experience, there's all kinds of social and traditional media springing up, like the very cool Renaissance magazine, telling Gen Xers how to cut through the retail noise and find great product that's right for them. But to me, it seems like we're really missing a trick here because this is the media finding a raison d'etre and a solution to the problem that's inherently one of retailers and brands not catering to the demographic in a clear and meaningful way. And then, of course, at the other end of the age spectrum, we've got Gen Z, a demographic which is set to comprise 40% of all shoppers in terms of headcount by 2020. And already this generation are outspending their older millennial counterparts by a very significant degree when it comes to self-purchasing. In fact, a whopping $143 billion versus $65 billion in the US alone. And an added bonus, unlike millennials, Gen Zers don't necessarily spell the death of bricks and mortar retail because they actually prefer to shop in store than online. And what are they shopping? Well, a recent survey by YPulse showed that the vast majority of their favourite brands are actually food, bev, and beauty brands. And a stat that's been out there for a while is that this generation of teens are spending more on food than fashion, which is partly down to experiences over possessions, that whole trend. But it's crazy that the demographic that should be most obsessed with fashion is spending more on food. But to give you a bit of a feel of what the list of top brands looks like in terms of fashion, it includes Hot Topic with its 90s retro and music merch focus, Vans, again, that 90s retro appeal coming in, American Eagle with its $1 billion Aerie business, which really appeals in terms of female empowerment because it doesn't retouch its ads. And the North Face, again with its emphasis on women's empowerment, environmentalism, and other causes that Gen Zers really care about. So a few fashion brands getting it right, but tons of food and bev brands doing it better, and still loads of opportunity for those who tap into this demographic in the right way. So it's really not all about millennials, and we need to wake up to that as an industry by accepting that millennials are actually really cash poor and currently really overserved, engaging better with older demographics who are fashion hungry and have the greatest disposable income, and future-proofing business by understanding the very different brand expectations of cash-rich Gen Zers. On to our second wake-up call for the day, and that is, you no longer need to be an expert. So a very contentious title, I know, and I'm clearly only half serious in that statement because, of course, we still need to be an industry built on expertise. But there is a lot of weird new stuff going on, which is literally breaking down the kind of exclusive ivory tower structure and reputation of the fashion industry. Here's a great example, which you may be familiar with. This is Virgil Abloh, who never formally trained in fashion design, taking his bow with Kanye there after he took the top job at Louis Vuitton Homme. And this is a big deal if you spent 4 to 6 years studying fashion at Parsons or somewhere and working your way up through the industry. And more Virgil, he's literally everywhere right now, and his collaboration with IKEA, which was launched to the press at Paris Fashion Week in October this year and goes on sale sometime next year. And for someone like Virgil, who trained in civil engineering, not fashion nor product design, it's all pretty good going. And clearly, in some cases, the power of influencers over experts is something we will just need to get used to. But we're mixing it up within industry roles as well. So you can now be a fashion editor on a magazine, but can also design, or edit, as they cleverly put it, a collection of sports footwear, as we recently saw here in the Anna Wintour by Air Jordan collab. And you can have absolutely nothing to do with fashion at all and still become responsible for one of the hottest t-shirt collections of the summer, as we saw in this random collab between LA's very cool advisory board Crystals and Wikipedia, no less. So this is all really about adopting the most open source thinking to keep things fresh and unexpected. And the point is that within that, you clearly don't need to be thinking about expert knowledge to make it work. You just need to be thinking out of the traditional industry box. Also, think about how anyone can now be a model. This is the biggest trend in terms of representation. So if you want your collection to look cool and of the moment, just stick it on ordinary people and you'll earn major street cred points. As in this Spring Summer 19 campaign for Martine Rose, which was modelled on kids picked up on the street in North London. And here's New York brand Gypsy Sport, which has an ongoing casting call out on its site for non-models to appear in its campaigns and runway shows. And this is all really saying we are a truly open-armed brand. We aren't exclusive and we embrace you. Also, let's not kid ourselves that the younger demographic think you need any kind of expertise to even build your own brand, because there are leagues of teens out there smashing it via social platforms and raking in healthier net profits than some mainstream fashion labels. This is 18-year-old Benjamin Kicks, who owns Sneakerdon, which sells incredibly rare trainers to celebs and less rare pairs to the public. And he's been going since he was 13, and this year was listed as having a net worth of over $1 million. And this is Internet Girl on the left, who is the queen entrepreneur of resale site Depop. And she's making a tidy fortune on the platform, selling mainly dead stock from the noughties and 90s, about 100 pieces a day, including fully styled outfit bundles at $150 a pop, which is so smart. Plus, she now engages in lucrative collaborations with brands like Lazy Oaf. And on the right is teenage girl next door Lydia Clear from Brighton, who is nowhere near Internet Girl in terms of teen reseller profile, but is still clearing around £3,500 a month in sales. And this is a screen grab of an hour's trade on Internet Girl's Depop account, which is seriously nice business when you've got no overheads and no one to answer to. As Shanu Walpita, one of our youth trend experts, put simply about Gen Zers, they all just want to be their own boss. And this is again redolent of the massive shift from experts dictating the status quo to a more open source, anyone can do it mentality. So, as I prefaced with this contentious title, of course we still need to be an industry full of experts, but it honestly isn't the ivory tower that it once was. So we need to adopt vibrant open source thinking to stay fresh. Just look at Virgil taking over the world to remember that one. We need to embrace normal as the new face of brand cool, because right now pro models have kind of lost their gloss. And we also need to understand the younger demographics' increasingly entrepreneurial spirit and working out how to engage with them. Okay, so to our third wake-up call, and this is, you have to dare to be different. And this has always been at the backbone of the best in creative industries. However, in fashion, we really seem to have lost the plot on this front, but never has it been more important and relevant to a brand's survival. This image is from my favourite ever Gucci campaign, which actually came out last year, 2017, but I think it sums up my point perfectly, and Gucci is the best example of a brand doing its own thing and daring to be different. And this is what happens when you do that. Gucci sales were up 45% in 2017, and they're forecasting growth of around 40% for this full year, which, given the current financial climate in fashion, is just astonishing. Operating profits were up 56% last year, and Kering are targeting breaking the $10 billion revenue mark in the next 2 years, which will make Gucci the biggest luxury brand in the world, taking over from Louis Vuitton. And I firmly believe that these outstanding financials are all because they have dared to be different. Because this is what happens when you don't dare to be different, when you don't change and you don't stand out from the crowd. Once America's biggest retailer, Sears, filing for bankruptcy, shuttering 142 stores by the year end, on top of stores already closed over the past 2 years. That's what happens when you kind of stick your head in the sand. And this tale of woe is obviously everywhere. After Claire's in the US emerged from Chapter 11, it now looks like they'll enter a CVA in the UK with 350 stores at risk. And we've also seen other mainstream stalwarts like Gap closing 200 stores this year. In fact, more than 3,800 store closures are expected in the US alone this year, which is a terrifying number. And with global reach, we don't just affect the outlook in our own territory, we actually export the problem. This is British chain New Look, which is also in a CVA, but replicated its problems overseas and is now closing all 120 of its stores in China. And basically all of these retailers are guilty of not daring to be different and have carried on just tweaking old strategies and formulas to devastating effect. But you don't need a Gucci-style makeover, though that would be nice, because doing things differently can come in many different guises. For example, it could be about looking at traditional trading and distribution models. And for department store dependent brands, this could be about thinking on your feet and pushing to plug the gap where those old school retailers like Sears in the US and House of Fraser in the UK are falling off. In this respect, Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger are sending a clear signal that Amazon is the future of fashion. And Amazon now offers a bigger selection of Calvin and Tommy clothing than Macy's and JCPenney, with those brands taking the risk and shifting channels to protect their brand image and boost sales. Or to own something is a great way to set yourself apart and stand out. And recently ASOS have been owning inclusivity and diversity with amazing multi-award winning campaigns like its More Reasons to Move active campaign on the left, which featured a truly inclusive cast of models, and its male beauty rather than male grooming launch earlier this year on the right. And the positive numbers follow through, with ASOS posting a 26% lift in sales and a 28% lift in profits for the fiscal year 17-18. And don't be scared to buck the prevailing product trend. Don't be afraid to stop following the herd. We know Gucci have done this to the extreme, but it doesn't have to be extreme. It's just about standing out from the crowd. And our friends at John Lewis and Partners have done exactly that with recent women's wear launches that are about a more creative and individual approach in order to stand out on the UK high street. And the results again come through in the numbers, with the company's weekly sales that are published in the public domain, indicating that its women's wear own brand collections are performing really well. In fact, for the last week of November, one of its women's wear own brands saw sales up nearly 150% on the year, while another was nearly 50% up. And within all of this, I would also say that daring to be different can just be about rejecting mediocrity, because mediocre isn't enough anymore. So this could be about very simple things done brilliantly, which is the antithesis of Gucci's madcap maximalism, but just as effective if you get it right. And British brand M&M is a great example of standing out in this way, with a defiantly simple collection put together with the most impeccable attention to detail and quality. And they're forecasting sales growth of 35% in 2018 after an equally strong 2017. And just a side note here, backtrack to that first wake-up call, it's not all about millennials. And these guys have already got that message and are reaping the rewards. So you have to dare to be different. And this means you need to stand out, because those who don't will become irrelevant and simply fade away. Also, try and own something. So make like Gucci with its very own look, or like ASOS with its award-winning campaigns. And pursue perfection, because mediocre is everywhere, and right now it's just not enough if you want to survive. Okay, so to our penultimate wake-up call, and this isn't a fashion forecast, it's more of a weather forecast, and I can tell you that the outlook is really, really quite bad. This is a digital readout showing that earlier this summer, Las Vegas was experiencing record-breaking temperatures of 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 50 degrees Celsius. And last year, NASA confirmed that going forward, flooding, drought, and extreme temperatures like this will become commonplace. And we know as consumers that this kind of seasonal disruption is already affecting our purchases. I mean, who goes out and buys a spring-summer wardrobe at the beginning of the season anymore? And if you're a retailer or a brand, you know that it's already affecting your sales. But astonishingly, many businesses still aren't responding to these shifts and doing something about it. In October, Superdry saw 20% wiped off its share value and issued a warning that 2018's profits were likely to be down by $10 million. And this was put down exclusively to the unseasonably hot weather around the globe, hitting sales of sweats and outerwear. So when are some brands going to learn and change the way they are doing things? Because there are various ways to counter this kind of seasonal disruption, which, let's be honest, is here to stay. We've been talking to clients about adopting climate-busting season-neutral strategies for years at Stylus, and last year we saw some great data on brands that had employed such strategies. 80% saw revenues go up by 10 to 20% for many of them, and a quarter claimed that Seasonless had added up to $6.5 million to their operating models. And the report also revealed that over half of them were looking to source more goods closer to home as part of extending Seasonless strategies. It's a strategy that helps Inditex Group stay ahead of seasonal disruption. But the master of season-neutral product is probably Uniqlo. They kind of own this territory. And largely down to very brisk Uniqlo sales in the US, parent company Fast Retailing recorded a 24% lift in net profits for the first half of 2018. So season neutralizing strategies, lots of different ways to implement them, and something definitely to talk to stylists about. And while we've got this need for a core, more season-neutral approach, we've also got a need for highly polarised product, reflecting the extremes of climate that are now becoming commonplace. And this means that destination wear sales are booming. That's clothes appropriate for the ski slopes and the beach. not just because we're travelling more, but also because this is kit we need to survive the highs and lows of weather in the city. And we need this product on demand all year round now. And an interesting stat for you here, Net-a-Porter saw a 500% increase in ski wear sales over a 3-year period to 2017. And I can guarantee that most of that product was bought for everyday city wear, not for vacation. And this was the major theme at the recent Spring Summer 19 runway shows. It was all about extremes of weather with a real focus on clothes made for a major downpour or for a heat wave. Fabric innovations are something else to think about when we talk about combating climate chaos. And again, we've been reporting on temperature regulating materials for a long time. But next year sees a flurry of brands tapping into this idea as a way to boost sales. Prada's relaunch of its 90s Linea Rossa label comes complete with high-tech, temperature-regulating cloths as the key update. And Stella McCartney for Adidas has been working with Parley to incorporate the same features into fabrics with an added sustainability message. So we can't control the weather, but as we've seen, we can create product and plan logistics to better work around it. And there are other things we can do, like use weather insights to inform real-time ad spend. As an industry, we're not great at this, but it works for other sectors. And as an example, the Subway chain recently boosted store traffic by 31% by changing its ads to correspond with weather shifts. According to IBM, the weather is responsible for nearly $500 billion in economic impact each year in the US alone. So seriously, there's a lot to be gained by working harder to counter climate chaos. To summarise, adopting season-neutral and polarised product strategies addresses the way people are actually shopping. Becoming more agile in how and when you deliver product, as well as your marketing support, will help to work around seasonal disruption. And getting technical with materials that are temperature regulating and have other weather-resistant features also helps in outsmarting this climate chaos. Thank you for staying with me so far. Just one more wake-up call to go through, and this is about how sustainable change in fashion isn't being driven by you. And when I say that, I'm talking about traditional brands, retailers, and manufacturers. And in the main, they're all doing their bit, but real sea change in the industry is potentially going to be driven by others. Hopefully at some point by governmental legislation, but also by the public, by the media, and by celebrities. So we'll start with celebrities, and this is SZA, who recently announced the launch of her Sustainability Gang collection. And this actually garnered more column inches than any other sustainable product launch that we've seen this year. And we're going to see more of this philanthropic, sustainable celebrity activity. We've seen it in bits and pieces before. A couple of examples here include Jessica Alba's The Honest Company, which despite major issues in 2017, recently received $200 million in fresh investment. And also we've got here Olivia Wilde's Conscious Collective. But I think we're going to see more cool influencers like SZA getting involved. And of course, whatever they do needs to be done with integrity and authority. But if it is, then the power of that influence could be significant for the sustainability cause. Because we do have something of a comms problem when it comes to sustainability. According to McKinsey Group research published this year, the gap between stated consumer interest in sustainable product and actual purchases is down to a lack of product, but also down to clear marketing. And I think other industries are much better at this than we are in fashion. Here's a great example of super clear messaging from Italian furniture company, Really. But in general, the sustainable product message can be quite dry, complicated, even hidden, and poorly communicated. But what we're starting to see happen is that the mainstream media are getting in on the act. And this is great news. And as we saw with this year's focus on Save the Oceans, once the press get their teeth into something like that, the public sit up and take notice. That's exactly why Save the Oceans and single-use plastics have suddenly resonated so much with consumers. And this year we also saw various national titles dedicate whole issues to sustainability, again brilliantly raising awareness, educating and engendering meaningful change. And tools to educate and inform are key. On the right here, we can see Fashion for Good's recently opened museum in Holland, which is there purely to educate consumers in all things sustainable. And on the left, we have dedicated magazine Pebble's new app, which features its brand new sustainable city guides, so you can go on your travels with a reliable roadmap of places to shop, eat, sleep, and drink with a clear conscience. But the biggest sustainable change is surely being driven by the consumer. Second-hand apparel sales are growing 24 times faster than traditional fashion retail, according to ThredUp. And resale site Depop recently secured $20 million in B-Series funding off the back of revenues of $230 million and growth of 130% in the US in 2017. And a more sustainable second-hand purchase is booming business at luxury level as well. Vestiaire Collective now has 7 million members globally, and 25,000 new pieces are submitted on consignment every week. And going back to those tools we talked about earlier, Vestiaire competitor The RealReal have just launched a sustainability calculator to celebrate the positive impact of consignment on the environment. The calculator assesses the overall environmental benefits of recirculating apparel and found that since The RealReal began in 2012, the 2.5 million pieces they've resold have offset 65 million car miles in greenhouse gases and energy. And extending the life of a product really is the consumer-led focus, not just via resale and consignment, but a tidal wave of interest in repairing and renewing what we already have, and swapping and sharing what we have through global communities such as Patrick Duffy's brilliant Global Fashion Exchange. And I think this point of community is really what I mean when I say sustainable change isn't being driven by you. It really is about working together rather than in isolation. When the ethical luxury brand Mayet pivoted to a collective model last year, I think that said a lot. And Paul Van Zyl, its founder, summed it up when he said, "The organising principle of ethical fashion combines community and collaboration, and there is something magical about that." I think magical, yes, but also most likely to drive real and meaningful change. So don't work in isolation on this, because it's going to take concerted collective effort on all of our parts. Engage with sustainable influencers, obviously always with integrity and authority, in order to really amplify your voice. Support the media's new interest in sustainable issues, because these guys are ultimately going to be the ones getting the message out there to everyone. And embrace consumer-led endeavours, because resale, repair and renew, and creating a sustainable community can all be part of your business. So we've looked at underserved demographics, at adopting more open source thinking, and at how you really need to stand out more. We've taken a rain check, and we've talked about not working alone when it comes to sustainability. And of course, there are tons of other issues affecting the fashion industry right now. But I truly think if you take on board these 5 and turn them into opportunities to improve business, then there's a good chance you can maintain relevance and be a driving force in fashion's new order. Thank you.